So, with hearing from both of you, it sounds that you've had to creatively walk a tightrope in terms of balancing the message of your art and the perception you're putting across, as well as the notes you're receiving from with whoever you've partnered with. Being able to politically navigate that space, how much has that contributed to your success?
I guess how much do you keep quiet at the right time and speak up at the other time too? I think I'm not sure we can put identity, personal identity. You as a person working through that industry, through that work, is kind of different than commercial work that you have to do. And I'm struggling with how to match that or answer that completely, to be honest.
I think it's either works very highly in my favor or it's like very against me, that there's no in between. So for example, there's some rooms I've been able to enter because of the very specific political space I occupy and my political interests. So let's say if a production hires me because we are looking to design an African American or a Black woman, then that would make me an asset to the production. However, which majority of the slate for most studios is, it has nothing to do with that, then I will not get hired. So I find that it's either strongly in my favor or strongly against. I hope that answers.
Yeah, so just using a bit of Naddya's response, how then have you, hopefully it simplifies the question for you, Yvonne, how have you build or establish a political space for your art to navigate or exist?
I think, again, keeping things separate, keeping my own personal work where I explore all those things and bring the best or the most important things to me out, being my oil paintings and the mural work. But then in terms of the commercial film work, that tends to be more for hire, that tends to be more for what the client wants in support of the story. But I think also drawing back on my experiences, drawing back on the things that I've seen and the places I have, I add that into what I'm crafting.
So the question for both of you then is, what do you feel has been your greatest artistic success?
It's a very big question. Well, it's big and it's not big. I always feel like I don't want to answer it because I don't think I've got there yet. But I have moments in my career that I'm very proud of, that I feel have been stepping stones in the journey. That even if, for example, it's not, I've done a couple of paintings where I go, I know what I broke through on a personal level to produce this series. So I have those as personal accomplishments. I did win the Visual Effects Society Award for our work on Avatar for the Floating Mountains. So that's a success. But again, that's a team effort and a team space. And then one of my proudest moments was I was awarded a mural for the city of Denver for the African American Research Library. And there I really had to learn, tell a story that was not mine, was others. But so I found that was a success in my life.
So and I'll come to you in a second. You've definitely had a lot of accolades and definitely have accomplished things with the projects you just mentioned. My question is, why wouldn't you feel that you've reached or you've achieved?
Because I'd like that to be a story from our perspective. I'd like that award to be, I'd like us to be rewarded for amazing work that we're doing with our story, with like something we've created. That's when I, on a personal level, want to feel like I've reached the point. So it comes down to what can we make in our voice, and then what can it look like, and then can it be seen for what value it brings?
Yes.
For me, I'd say that I really hope that my greatest success is still ahead. It would be really tragic if it had already happened. But I'd say through all the wonderful opportunities I've had in my career so far, one of the most successful moments I can identify was at the beginning. So I just started working at Shujaz. I don't know if anybody reads or remembers this. So that was my first. So it was my first job. I was 19, And I was in a matatu coming home, and you know the way there's always a newspaper in the front, and then somebody was reading it, and it was an issue that I'd worked on. So the person was reading it, and he just kind of like chuckled, and I was like, like that's it. But I played it cool. Like I didn't tell him I did it. I remember just that connection, because I remember working in the studio thinking this is hilarious, and then the person laughed. The fact that it landed was amazing. That feeling, I think, is what I'm always hoping to cultivate. Since then, I've been working in this space for 15 years. I've worked for studios that have larger names and longer histories, but the distribution strategies don't focus on here. So let's say I can tell somebody I've worked for X project, and then they're like, can I watch it? And I'm like, what had happened was. So for me, even if the budget is larger, or if the scale of production is larger, but the audience can't access it, I can't describe that as a complete success. So I'd say that moment was really complete and really satisfying, because I made it, the person I wanted to see saw it, and I could see them seeing it. And I feel like that connection is what I'm always hoping to define as success in my work.
So as an artist and writer myself, I definitely understand the value you get from people drawing pleasure, inspiration from your work. But now, finding an anchor for whoever came before, who would you quote as has been your inspiration artistically?
Thanks. There's a quote I really like by a graphic novelist called Art Spiegelman, and he did this book, Mouse, about the Holocaust. And there was an interview he was doing once, and there's an excerpt from it where, oh, spoiler alert, yeah, they're mice, and they're Jewish mice, and they're in a concentration camp, and he's asking his dad about his experience there. So they are driving on a street in New York, and then there's a black mouse outside, and it's snowing. And then I think mice in the graphic novel represent people who are being subjugated. So the mouse is black, but it's still a mouse. So they are driving, and then Art asks his dad, hey, can you pick up this mouse? And then Vladek, who is his father, says, we don't pick up fill in the blank Yiddish for nigger or something. We don't pick up mice like that. And Art was horrified, because he's like, didn't you go through a whole Auschwitz? Don't you know that this kind of thinking can lead to such acute destruction? But it's in the interview, he says it was at that point that he realized that suffering doesn't create noble beings, it just creates more suffering. So I think there's a danger where people think that if I just excavate like horrors, that means the work has value. But I think when I latch onto that quote, I'm always thinking, yes, we have the wound, we can look at it, but then how do we do the healing work around it? That's an additional step, and that's the step that I'm always interested in.
My answer is going to sound very simple compared to that. One of my early inspirations, and who I always kind of draw back to, is actually Frida Kahlo. And I think what it is about her is that she's dealing with identity. I like the word I read once where she was described as uncompromising. And I think that power to say, I am this person, I live like this, I look like this, I'm representing my space that I'm in, is on a personal level for my fine art, where I'd like to become brave enough to get to and say, this is me, unapologetic, this is my work, uncompromising, and this is what I want to say, and this is how I want to say it. So I always kind of, and then in the sense of the public art and having such strong identity, you see it, you know it, you feel it, you can place her, and you can feel what she had to work through to get to that place. So that's a person, and I've always carried her kind of with me as somewhere I'd like to get back to. You know, when you do a lot of commercial work, I think you compromise in a different way. And when I want to go back to my personal work and have an identity around that work.
So So with tying in identity, tying in inspiration, and then with the subject being world building and the future imagining, technologies available to artwork are changing all the time. Whether it's shooting films on your iPhone, now we are experiencing the advent of AI. What is your reaction to AI in the art world?
AI is a big topic. It's also a big disruptor currently. I'm not going to gloss over anything. AI has pretty much put the visual effects and film industry at a standstill for this last year. It's been a horrible year for film and visual effects because of the fundamental issue that it is to replace artists. It is to replace us and our creative process. And this obsession with speed, and we need more, and we need it faster, and we need to produce and produce. I think the measure that AI is a tool, and it should remain as a tool, but in the hands of producers or in the hands of, I've had instances over this year where I've literally lost work or not been included because we're testing that AI route, because we're battling with the AI prompter for this kind of work. The danger for me is that AI only draws upon what it already knows. And then if you're saying the stories we're yet to tell of our continent, of our location, of fresh stories, where are we going to draw this material from if you're going to just prompt it and create it? So I think it causes, at the moment, a big space of uncertainty. I think I fought it a lot, but I've also accepted it now as a tool. I've had to take a step back and find where I integrate the tool into my personal pipeline without losing my purpose as coming to work. What am I creating? What am I tasked to do? So I recently the presentation I did just last weekend was about where in my process of world building and creating do I plug in AI as a tool. I think there's also a small danger in the terms of the data sets on the continent, on Africa, on other, because I've tested it, I've prompted it, and it's just completely off kilter. Like, what is this thing giving me back? So I'm not going to rosy it up. It's a tool. It must remain a tool. But the danger of something when you actually don't have a foundation and fundamentals in your toolkit, this becomes actually quite a dangerous tool, because there's a sense of complacency, there's a sense of this is good enough, and most of the times it's not. It needs to be generated, it needs to be broken, it needs to be put back together, and it needs to be an aid. But if you don't actually know it, then it's a problem. You don't know your fundamentals.
So definitely, it's, from what you said, it's kind of sabotaging the human experience of the art. And if I was to use an analogy, it would be fast food versus a home-cooked meal, right? There's no human element, there's no traditional recipe handed down from generation to generation, and there's no room for, obviously, expansion.
But you could use it to have stuff sent over to your house, speed up that process. But you're not breaking the fundamental thing, which is the recipe, which is the love that came through this work, but you sped up the trip to the shop.
Very much so. Naddya, anything to add?
I think I'll just echo some of what Yvonne has said. It has been used on productions that I'm on, and it's terrifying because one of the offerings I'd give is in the visual development side of production, which is the ideation phase, which is the part where I think I feel the most free and relaxed. And it's one of the first assets I offer production. But then they'll be like, so we typed it into Midjourney, and we have produced 15 options in 0.12 seconds. And some of those things were good, guys. I was stressed. I was really, really stressed. But then the thing that I found is that there is still a limit. There's a way it cannot, there's some things it still doesn't know, and there's some things it still can't see. So it will look like the 15 options it gave were really like self-referential. So it looked like, yeah, all of it was copies of copies, but I feel like that original thing, my very specific experiences of not just a girl in Africa in a village, but like my sister and how she holds her school bag. Those are things that only I can bring. And I feel like that they still haven't cracked that yet. So it is a threat, but I have not been threatened completely yet. In terms of including it in my production pipeline, I still haven't done it. Like I've experimented with it, but I think sometimes I'm slow to uptake new tools. So I just haven't found a way to make it me do ideation of things that I don't like. But I imagine that once I'm able to crack that, it could be a very powerful arsenal for a studio that's small like mine. Maybe I could make a feature in a year instead of 5. So those are challenges that are available, which I'm still gathering the courage to pursue.
If I can add the problem as well, we say it's out there, we can use it, we can use it. You cannot use it as final pixel at all. And then if you do put it out and present it, where did it come from? I mean, the whole ethic part around AI has not even been dealt with, that you cannot show that to a client. But the part that terrifies me is as a mad painter, as a concept artist, you work all this time to be asked for your ideas, to be asked for your suggestions. So I just read recently in an article that was just shared with me about, for example, John Wick. If there's a studio, Lionsgate, who have gone now and are starting this process. And you think, oh, we've done 4 versions already, let's start number 5. AI, go make us the storyboards and everything for John Wick. What is it going to do? Just collect from before, regurgitate and spit it out. That to me does not actually, we've not made anything new. We just rinsed and repeated, you know.
So going by what you both said, the biggest threat is that AI brings is devaluating the creative art process. On the other side of that, then, how do you as artists assign value to your art?
That's a good question. I feel like I add value by staying competent and practicing consistently. So let's say I cannot ride on one production for the rest of my career. I feel like I'll stay valuable if I stay curious and if I continue practicing as a draftsman. That'll make me more valuable. So for example, if I go into a production at the beginning of my career versus now, I can quote very differently because I have 15 years of pencil mileage. And then I can show you the sketchbooks and you can see. I feel like there's some things that you can't fake. Like I think if you have capacity and you practice, I genuinely think that you just get better and hopefully the right space will value you accordingly. So that's the first thing that I do. And then the second thing I do is do homework about the context of who is hiring me and to do what. I read the trades. I'm always seeing like what is this worth or how can I negotiate? And then I always engage my peers who are in similar spaces to ask them, what has been your experience? How much did you charge them? And can I do the same? Can you give me your union spreadsheet so that I can see so they don't undersell me? And I find that having a creative community which wants you to succeed also helps you to understand your value, not just as an individual, but in context.
I was going to say almost everything that Naddya said, but I'd like to add that what I'm bringing is I've actually learned how to listen. My experience has taught me how to listen to what you want and you as a client or you as this production want. Because we're working on subjective ideas. We're working on things that we're making up and we're telling a story. So I think over the years, I've learned how to listen in order to provide input, in order to help create, in order to ideate, hearing what the project and the story keeps wanting to go towards. So I think it is a thing where AI can't listen to you. It can't see as we're talking over on the top surface that actually what was asked for was that little sentence in the middle somewhere in one of the conversations. So that's what I'll add on top of the ability to listen now over this time.
And so with both of your responses, you've actually answered the next question I was just going to ask, but I'll ask it in case there's anything you're going to add on. There's this, especially in Kenya, art is treated as a hobby by a lot of the business world, or we're seen as mad scientists. How do you then navigate as a business person with your artistic identity?
Kenya is difficult. It is treated as a hobby. I was quite curious where I was part of a discussion and a brainstorming thing where they invited investors and business people to meet artists. And they actually asked a series of anonymous questions. And the feedback of what was perceived of what artists are was actually shocking. You know, as simple and as silly as, oh, they're all drug addicts, you can't trust them with budget, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it was quite shocking because at the next breath, they turn around and say, this is a creative industry that has so much potential. So Kenya is quite difficult to navigate. I'll be very honest in terms of visual effects. We're not yet there. Excuse me. So we're not fully there. So it's going to take a little bit of time. Yeah.
Thanks. It's all right. It's all right. You can gather your thoughts. For me, I'd say I am very, very fortunate to have had, I guess, the perfect context to have been allowed to be a mad scientist. So I know a lot of people who work in animation or in visual arts. When they told their families, I want this, they're like, be serious, get a real job, stop wasting my time. But for me, it was never like that. From when I was as early as 3, I told my parents, cartoon, and they were like, okay. And they encouraged every single step of the way. They bought every sketchbook. They took me to every like big animation premiere, no matter where we were. Opening day, we'd be there to watch it. So they made me feel not only that it was my thing, but that it was serious. It was very serious. My parents, like one is a medic, the other is a scholar, and they never made me feel that my pursuit was anything less than theirs. They said, no, if this you're drawing, then you're going to draw properly. And so by the time I was doing my degree in animation and borrowing Grey's Anatomy to study the human body, I'd call my dad, like, Dad, Grey's Anatomy. He's like, hey, you thought you could run, but you can't. And so I understand that context is very specific and very luxurious, but I'm a delicate flower, and it's what I needed to recognize myself as the artist I've come to trust, and the kind of artistry I continue to cultivate. I think as a business person, those tools are ones that I'm always learning. Because of my spiritual practice, I go for a lot of faith-based entrepreneurship curricula. And I find that it's made business not just a persona where I have to like become a shark or a suit and be like, now I'm business Naddya. Like I feel like it's allowed me to explore ways where I was created to be successful at business, the same way I'm a successful artist. Like I don't feel like I'm an imposter when I'm entering a boardroom or when I'm putting CEO, not just creative director, on my company. And when I'm signing certain contracts, I can say that I can also take up this kind of space. And I find that specific community has given me a lot of confidence as a businesswoman.
So the second last question I'll have then is, how would you contrast the work environment in Kenya with the international work you've done, and what's the gap? What needs to be bridged to, I guess, move the Kenyan industry forward?
I'd say for me, my best professional experiences have been working for multinational studios, but from Nairobi. That is the sweetest experience, because you're able to work with people at the highest level and then go see your family and then exchange those dollars, but do I say, for your Kenya shilling life. That for me, there's been seasons of that where I'm like, this is really, really living. And for me, that's what I hope to sustain more of. And in order for us to get there, I feel like the answer to that question, it can't be linear. Like, I don't think the answer for the entertainment or animation ecosystem in Nairobi is to become Los Angeles. Like, I'm really not convinced by that, because those systems are also not perfect. They have strikes. Like, I think it used to be every 50 years and every 30, 20, 10, 5, because there is a lot of things there that don't work. So I feel like we are in a really exciting space now where we can decide, we can make it up, we can learn from them and see what has worked, what has not worked, and continue to experiment with each other and decide what kind of space we're making for ourselves.
I think I guess I can say fortunate enough to have worked on that side and worked on this side. I think for me, I'm also trying to push towards a slightly different line of create the visual effects and not strictly animation. So where I'm trying to look at it from my point of view or from our point of view is how do we actually build that industry where we can tap into all of these skill sets and all of these tools. I think, to be honest, one of the main things, and it's the soft skills actually that come around creating art and creating in a professional setting. What does that look like? Simple things like even the level of where we're trying to push to. I want to stay, oh, it sounds arrogant to say, but I want to stay at the level that I have succeeded at and have been to. And I believe we can all get to that level, but there is a lot of work that has to be done to get to that level. How do we get there? By collaborating, by working together, by drawing on each other's experiences, and then slowly by slowly build it up. I think I agree with Naddya. It doesn't all work perfectly out there. It's a lot of broken pieces on the outside. But the beauty of that is we can reference, we can do it differently because you can step back and say, what's not working? We're not rigid as such. But the idea the hope for me is that we grow the industry rather than we grow a person or one person working on a project is not success for our ecosystem, for our region. We need to have work coming to feed the whole region, to feed the ecosystem. So how do we attract projects or make our own projects and then continue to work on those projects? Came back after my coughing fit.
And then the last question I have before we take questions and engage with the audience is, where do both of you see your work going?
For me, I'd really like to get into licensing. So before I used to think that drawing was this infinite capacity that I had, but I've had a few experiences in the recent past which made me really see that this thing is finite. And the people who extract the most value are not even the artists, it's people who replicate it. So let's say if there's a big animated feature, where most of the money will come from is not box office, it's parks and resorts and bed sheets. And toys, Happy Meal toys. So for me, that's what I'm pursuing right now. I'm experimenting with that. And also outside of like products, also syndicating existing property. So let's say if there's a series of health comics I've done in Nairobi about reproductive health, how do I take that same content and take it to a completely new territory, like a Lusophone territory? So that means the same girls who are reading in East Africa are reading in Brazil, are reading in Portugal, Angola. Like, I think that's infinitely more value return from the same 12 pages that I've drawn. And I need to find and trust a translator and then find ways to syndicate or license the property outwards. And that's a legal experiment I'm currently running.
Where I'm finding myself being pushed towards is actually more into leadership and into mentorship and into actually being called into spaces where I'm asked more about what is the creative vision of something as opposed to sitting at your desk just getting another picture out, which I still enjoy, sitting at my desk doing another picture, but I'm also finding it does have a shelf life, and at a certain point you need to pass it on. You need to pay it forward to the next person to have that slot on the screen. So how do we create those environments where, you know, in 5 years we have 20 matte painters out of Nairobi who are getting establishing shots on the big screen? That's what I'd like to find myself going towards. On a personal level, I really want to go back to painting and actually take this life of experience and see where that pushes me next to figure out how I become uncompromising and find my identity in the work.
So now I'd like to open it up to the floor. I guess we can get 3 questions from each side. So anyone who may have a question in the back.
Hi, thank you for that. That was fun. So, my question is pertaining to AI. I think, Yvonne, you said that a big fear you have is that already the data that we have there, those are already told stories. I imagine some of them have nothing to do with our context here or even the truth of our stories here. But AI has come, it's coming, people are going to use it, there's no going back from that. And I just wanted to hear your perspective on how we can include more African art and more African stories. So even as this technology grows, we can still be included. It's not only regurgitating ideas that are often really harmful to the art out there.
I think the simple answer is let's create those stories with pen and paper and vision and creativity. You can use AI in those spaces to figure out how to get the word out, to figure out how to multiply it, to multiply your vision, but not to use it to generate your initial thoughts or your story. Like the data sets are not there to tell the correct story. You know, our narrative is always going to be pegged in poverty, a certain look, or this or that, even the generic gentrification of the faces, you know. But here's another angle that you could use it is generate a generic face, use it as a tool, now paint into it, change it, adapt it, break it, you know, use it for, in a funny way, as a matte painter, I've always used AI, which is me. I've spent time on the internet collecting reference. So in a way, it's a form of what the AI is doing. It's collecting reference. But as you're collecting reference, you're thinking about it, you're reimagining it, what it can be. So I think a lot of the times you can use it for efficiencies to maybe send the word out, or to what else could we use it for? To generate a simple image that you want to jump from and go away from it. Like, do not stay with it as it's generated. I think, like Naddya said, like bringing the element of here's my generic character, which is an aid in my work. In my past experience, that would have been a 3D render or an older photograph that you'd use, and now customize it to tell the story that you want to tell. So keep using it as an aid, but keep coming back to what is it that defines an African story, first of all. Have that conversation with yourself. What is it that you're trying to bring to the table? Keep your North Star always around you, so that when you start tapping into these tools or using these things, you always go back to your North Star and say, am I following my vision? Am I following my messaging or my want for this? Hope that answers.
That's the gentleman.
Hi. Hi. I have a question. If a 5-year-old approached you and told you, I would love to draw cartoons, or I would love to write stories in form of pictures, what advice would you give them? And what do you think schools, especially in Kenya, or teachers in Kenya, should adopt or try doing to help more, to nurture more virtual storytellers? Thank you.
Thanks for that question. I'd say 5. Keep drawing. Just keep drawing, keep drawing, keep drawing. If they are 5, hopefully they have a guardian. I'm around them. I'd tell them to be really serious about nurturing that interest, and not just indulging them, but challenging them and helping them to grow. Like, I still remember getting notes from my dad on my drawings when I was like 6. He's like, but this perspective. And I'm like, you can't just put it on the fridge and give me a star. He'll be like, no, it's off. Like, it's squiff, it's off. And so I feel like getting them used to not just joy, but also understanding criticism early, I think will make them into very healthy artists. In terms of the curriculum, I would say I think solid training in the fundamentals is really key. I think sometimes people think art is not serious or it's all instinct, but the truth is, in addition to instinct, there are rules, there are techniques, and those help you communicate to the best of your ability. So I wonder if there's a way, if there's any KICD people in the house, or if I can find somebody to email to start it from really early, because I find that what happens now is that there's a lot of post-secondary programs coming out, but for people who've never drawn. And so we're really trying to find out how to bridge that gap.
I'll just also add, times are changing. Your 5-year-old might not be drawing, but playing Minecraft, for example. Yeah, I have one who plays Minecraft over here. But I would also say, from a parent or an older perspective, don't dismiss it as something, waste of time. See what it actually can lead to, because actually, to be totally honest, some of those platforms are the beginning of world building. They're already working in 3-dimensional space. They're already traveling through different realms. And so they're already starting to open their minds into different avenues. Granted, make them stand up every so often and drink some water and get away from it. But just not to diminish that some of those tools are actually the reality and the world we're actually moving towards. We're moving to virtual reality. We're moving to immersive experiences. Those are all going to be the new jobs and the artists of the future. So drawing and painting, 100%. Draw, draw, draw. The fundamental will never go away. Photography will never go away. But there are new mediums which we kind of have to get along with and get on with. But when you see things like kids who can move through 3-dimensional space already, it's actually something you need to ask, the game industry and the film industry. It's all about that 3-dimensional representation.
I would also want to add that make them understand for themselves why they're doing it. Because when you're dealing with children at that age, you get a lot of people get caught up in fads, and they do it just as by the way or through peer pressure, trying to match whatever their peers are doing. So they have to want to and understand why they're doing it for themselves. Yes. So then I'll come to you. So you first.
Hello. Hi, how are you? Naddya, Yvonne, good to see you. So my question could be to both of you, but I remember you spoke about AI and you weren't really having it. So I'll direct it to Yvonne. Has there ever been a time where you found yourself at odds or competing with AI? And if so, how did that story go?
I'm going to own up that this is not a plant. This is actually somebody who knows me. No, but actually,
That's a plant.
I have recently just been in a job where literally the job was we're competing with the AI prompter. Us as 3 artists were trying to beat him because of what was happening to the job. So it was a horrible reflection. It was a horrible realization that this is the avenue and the way the world is going. We won, but we lost the second part. But it wasn't so much that. It's, again, how I think I earlier mentioned, a little bit implied that how production and how the money and how the producers start to see your value and your worth when a prompter is producing 30 to 40 images a day. 3 artists are producing 1 each, but they're all on point. But on a piece of paper, we're losing the battle severely. So these are the things we're going to have to navigate. I do feel, not to put a horrible, negative energy into the water, I do feel like it's starting to reset itself a little bit. The realization that this is just a tool, it cannot be implemented, it has a lot of legal, ethical issues. It's reshifting, it's resettling into a new normal that hopefully we can find our place back in. It's not all negative.
I have a response to that, and as well as in response to what Sharon was asking earlier. My greatest hope for AI would be that it's not all under OpenAI, or it's not all just under one company. Because I think what I'm really hesitant about is, let's say, the fact that there's no African assets within their libraries, but then if you keep feeding it, then they know all about us, then they own us. It's another way to colonize or occupy real estate, but of the imagination, of virtual real estate, which I don't think is progress. So I'd really hope for companies, local AI companies who produce local models that protect our sovereignty digitally. I think that could be a cool step forward. So that's just like a hope that I have for AI. I wanted to add to the conversation.
Yes. Then we have the lady in the orange shirt.
Thank you both for sharing your stories. You both mentioned that it's you have contracted work. So clients come and ask you, this is my idea, and you have to produce it as part of your job. Have you ever been in a situation where what you're being asked is contradictory to your values? And what have you done about it? Second question is, 50 years from now, artists like you, what do you hope will have happened in the art world, and how do you think that we can make it easier for them now?
Thanks for that great question. The first part, yes, I have faced that, and then eventually I was fired. No, but no, but what I learned was that because there was the director and what the director wanted, and my job was to serve the director's vision. But there was some things the director was asking for, and I was like, but I disagree. And then they were like, but we don't care what you think. It's not your show, so you can't. And that was a hard lesson to learn. And since actually going through that process, I've actually come to appreciate that even though my personal politic did not agree with what they wanted, I understand what it is to have somebody have the oversight and make all the decisions. I understand how that is essential to make a production run, because everybody has opinions and histories and all of this. And ultimately, the goal of an animated project is to feel like one hand has guided it through. So I understand, even though I still disagreed, I understood how that there is a space and time for that conflict. And sometimes somebody has to say no and somebody has to say yes. So I understand that. In terms of what I'd hoped for 50 years, just like healthy, regular schedules, not people doing 8,000 jobs, but you come in, you do your one job, then you go home, you sleep, then you eat good food, then your weekend, you don't even look at your computer. I think the one experience I had with a larger studio where they gave me my brief and I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, give us these 3 things. I'm like, you don't want 18 things? They're like, no, the 3. And you're going to pay me? Then they're like, yeah. I don't have to chase you? No. And I was like, what do you mean? Then I finished the work, I went home, I slept. That was, I think, just like a healthy pace. We're still challenged, but there's enough. We have health insurance, dental. That is my decadent dream for the next 50 years.
In terms of projects that I've disagreed with, it hasn't happened too many times, but I have asked to come off a show or to move to a different show. There's certain, again, working in those bigger bigger show company spaces, there's just so much you're going to shift the needle or move it, or so not being defeated, not just saying it's how it is, but you kind of try to take your fight somewhere else and say, I'm going to put my effort into this space and I try also to stay in projects that something comes back from it. It's not all about chasing money. It's not all about chasing the next paycheck and things like that. So that's why also asking, how come you don't feel like you already arrived? Because you just kind of have to keep finding those perfect spaces and those perfect collaborative spaces. I think in 50 years, yes, a healthier working appreciation for what art is and what artists do. That's a huge shift because of this AI thing as well, where speed seems to be the necessity. And, at a certain point, having 100 versions doesn't make it better. It's just 100 versions and nobody can actually make a decision. I've been in situations where it comes back to version 1, and let's explore version 1 again. A lot of the visual effects industry, and I hope when we're able to create these spaces and these jobs or these bigger things, they're not healthy. I worked at Weta Digital, which is, huge, amazing visual effects company. We worked 80 hours a week, standard. So there was no quality of life. But what was the choice at that point was to move away from that and say, this is not how it's supposed to be. And a lot of the times that is created because it's not collaborative, because it's not pulling on everyone's best skills. It becomes about ego, it becomes about the big machine. So I hope in 50 years we're learning to work collaboratively, hopefully not by 50 years, like round the corner soon, and that really projects should be fun. We're doing art. We're not opening and operating on people. We're doing art. So I hope we can just create a healthy space for creation.
So, question there?
First of all, so nice to see Yvonne up there, my former classmate. So African music is really happening globally. You know, through African music, our stories are being told. What's missing for visual storytelling to get to that level of influence globally and acceptance? What will it take?
Hi, Wanja. We were in class many, many years ago. I think actually I'm going to reference just the experience I had last weekend. I was with the creator of Kugali, the guys that did Iwaju. And so this was slated as our big visual animated feature coming out of Africa, out of Nigeria. But still the interesting dynamic of it was the actual fabrication or production of the cut of the animation was done by Cinesite Canada. So Disney, even in their negotiating with them, said, here's a great story, let's test it out, let's see how it goes. But they still didn't trust the full process back into the system. So I'll sum it up. I feel, this is a personal opinion, that it's actually about trust. We actually have to have a few more proof of concepts that it does work. I keep hearing, even when I was in Joburg, the Netflix people, they do not look at the rest of Africa. They're only looking at South Africa because they keep saying we don't have a market, which is quite interesting but the truth is we tend locally to watch Western. We do not actually support and build our own ecosystems and our own, we're not supporting our own creations. And so how is it to change is because like the music coming out of Nigeria is listened to by Nigerians, it's listened to by other African countries. But if a show or a production is made in Kenya, would South Africans watch it? Would West Africans watch it? Would we watch it ourselves? So I think we have to build the culture of appreciating our own artwork. There's an amazing animator over here, Salim, I'm going to call out, has a wonderful comic book. Do we buy Salim's comic book and support his comic book art? You know, so I think we need to do more to elevate and hold our local folks more, support them, and then we build our own, I don't want to say worth, because we already have worth, but we need to create more of that market. It always comes down to market, and it's horrible that we equate art and what we do to the market. But I think as a starting point, why on a visual or story point, it's visibility and then it's trust. They're not giving the budgets. So they'll also say this is a great story, but they're slashing the budget to 150. But then they want the same value as, or the same production quality as something that came out of a production that was given $6 or $1 million, and you've been given 250 and you're told compete. So the field is not fair. It's not level. But we're going to have to just keep pushing that needle. Iwaju is a starting point. There'll be a next one. Hopefully the next time they do Iwaju, they actually can have a few more animators locally working on it. So I think whoever has an opportunity to be at the forefront of changing the industry is to always make sure we can tap it back to an intern in Kenya or an apprentice here, so we can keep building the skill sets. I hope that answers.
If I can just add a point to that, I think it's a two-headed problem. So you have the individuals in the audience who have to buy into the work. You start speaking about music, so it's very easy to jump onto music. If we look at what happened before and during the Gen Z protests, the anthem became Angukanayo, very viral. It is harder for visual storytelling to go viral, but that's because of both the audience and the system. I can probably ask anyone here, growing up, they were familiar with the Greek or Roman legends, but then the same thing doesn't happen to African legends. And a part of that is the education system. So we also have to get art into the education system and have it get recognized from earlier on. So we have to individually build our loyalty and then systemically as well. Yes, and Russell?
Hi. I wanted to know what you think of the interaction between the pictures and the story itself, like the script, because obviously bringing pictures will create a reality and give like some flesh to the words that were used in the script. And how does it interact? Did it already happen that you were bringing some pictures and those pictures gave a new direction to the story that was initially planned? And how would you reflect on it?
I can respond. I think for me, whenever I get a new script, the first thing I do is print it out and go with my pencil and do what are called thumbnail drawings. So a thumbnail drawing is just like a really janky, tiny sketch. But what it does, it captures like the initial reaction that I have, the visceral reaction I have to the words. So how I normally describe drawing to people is that it's like a seismograph, like the things that measure earthquakes. So there'll be like a force that shakes, and then there's a needle that does this. So I think drawing, for me, that's how I'd explain it to somebody. So I'd take in a stimuli or a story or a brief, and then I just have to trust those initial reactions. And I find that even after I clean it up with my software or whatever, trying to capture that initial spark that I have from that first read, that is the work. So that for me is how words and pictures interact. Read and then try to just capture that initial spark as quickly as possible.
I think same beginning point, and then pushing the concept a bit further to refine it as you go. But then I think this also comes to a point where you have to come back as an artist to the scriptwriter or to the director and now have a discussion about, this is what it gave to me. What did it give to you? How do we bring those things together? Because again, it's all subjective. Moonlight, this night is one thing to me, is another thing to you. But I think it's the same process. You start, you read, you make your first impression, you come back to be collaborative. Because at the end of the day, you're not tasked with telling your story, you're tasked with telling this story or that story. Yeah.
So we just have to end, I guess, with final remarks.
I think we said everything. Anyway, no, I want to say thank you. I think I'll let you go, Naddya, while I think of my final remarks.
Yes, thank you. I feel really grateful to be in this space, to have all your listening ears and to share the stage with Yvonne, who's somebody I really respect and really admire. I think it speaks to Macondo's amazing curation that they picked two African female practitioners who are working at a certain level, and one who concerns herself with building environments and somebody who concerns themselves with the actors within the environments. I think it's a really well-crafted conversation, and I'm just grateful to be here. And yeah, we can keep talking outside if you like.
For me, I think it's a new space. I didn't quite imagine I'd be in a literary festival, and I was actually quite nervous. But I'm actually starting to see this interconnectivity that we really have to keep pursuing, because people with words inform people with pictures, and if we can kind of keep building these narratives and these tools, and we help each other. And I want to say thank you to the organizers, Mutendei, for moderating and bringing us through on this journey, and for the great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. As I said, if you find them outside, you can continue the discussion and enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you.